What is up, everybody? Michael here today, bringing you another video, and we are back with the Woodsboro Retrospective. Today, we're going to be covering one of the best films in this series, in my opinion, Scream 2. And I'm here with my co-host, Donovan and I. How are you doing, my friend?
Doing great, man. Excited for this. We've said it a couple of times now. We love the original Scream. It's the best movie in the series, but the sequels are when that's like the real meat of this journey is digging
Absolutely.
into the sequels, both what we see on screen and all the production stuff. So I'm ready to dive deep, friend.
Yeah, this is one of those rare cases where the immediate sequel is nearly as good as the original, at least in my eyes, because I think talking generally about the film before we really get into it, I think the thing that this film, to its detriment and also to its many successes, is how meta it is and how it really gets into the weeds of sequels, horror movies, and even obviously the classic slasher tropes that have been exemplified in all of these Scream films and slashers in general. And this intro that we're obviously about to get into is one of probably the most stunning to me horror intros, and even on par with the original, which is saying something, which is such an iconic, notable scene. I don't know how you feel about this intro, Donovan, but this one shakes me up. It's good.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. We talked about how the intro to Scream 1 could almost be its own podcast. You could almost really say the same for 2. There's so much to unpack there. I think Scream 2, just as a whole, such a fascinating movie. I mean, it came out in 97, 1 year after the original, actually 1 week short of a year. I believe Scream came out on December 20th, 96, and this was like December 12th, 97, which is absurd because even in today's climate of sequel mania, you don't get them that fast.
Yeah, not at all.
And for it to still be incredibly sharp, well made, and as good as it is insane. And it's clear how great of a sequel this is going to be from this opening scene in the theater.
Yeah. Man, how do we even start this? I mean, this movie literally just picks up with Maureen Evans is her name.
Yeah, it's Maureen. I didn't write the last name. I believe it is Evans, and she's there with Phil, and obviously played by Jada Pinkett and Omar Epps, which
is like the perfect, if you were gonna pick two young, up and coming, great black actors or actresses from that time. Amazing choice. Amazing choices. Omar Epps is so funny in this scene too. I feel like he really gets to show a lot of his personality, as does Jada Pinkett, and their chemistry is great. And it actually, more so than even Casey in the original, I feel like it very quickly you gain an attachment for these characters because of how relatable, especially Jada Pinkett's character is as a horror movie audience goer who is just like, don't do this, don't do that. Why would you do this? And get out of the house. And as you know, obviously there is always a killer amok in these Scream intros, so they are not safe for very long. But that buildup of dread due to her watching Stab, which is the remake created in this universe, or a movie created off of the events of the first Scream within this universe that I'm sure we're going to be talking about as well. It's just a very fun, intense scene and a great homage to the original, and a very good commentary on audiences and their perception of violence.
It's a great commentary on audiences, and it's also a great commentary on horror movies themselves. I think their initial conversation, they're talking about black people in horror movies and whatnot. Obviously, meta off the bat because they're black people that are about to get killed in the very beginning. They're gonna be the first people to die in this horror movie. So some straight commentary there from Wes Craven. I love Omar Epps' line about not wanting to go see a Sandra Bullock movie. It's like nobody's paying $750 to see some Sandra Bullock shit. Just a random shot at Sandy B. I thought was funny.
Lots of random shots of celebrities in this movie, honestly.
Yeah, no, really, I've got a film written down. I'm like, hey man, again, it's there like a snapshot of that current climate, which is great. And there's another really funny one I have written down that comes up later. But I love that we get I believe we get Red Right Hand in the theater as they're going
right off the rip early. Yes.
It's already a tradition at this point. I love that this is the birth of Stab, which of course they didn't know at the time, but that goes on to be not the centerpiece, but just the consistent motif throughout the Scream movies up until the latest one. It's like the huge plot point. So I thought that was cool to see that in its beginnings. And I love to look at this theater. I was like, I want to go see a movie here.
For real. Yeah, maybe not with this rowdy of an audience, but a movie here would be fun.
I wanted to
Yeah.
ask them, like, when they go into the theater and it's like they open the door and there's like kites flying, popcorn in the
Dude,
air. I was like, I wanted to ask, I was like, have you ever been to a theater this lively for anything ever or
no.
anything even close to that?
No,
I
but
was like, I
maybe it
couldn't
was just like
imagine.
the 90s were a different time. Like I obviously I don't think this was super common to happen back then, but maybe the rules were just a little more lax. I mean, there was a time we could smoke in a theater, so who knows?
That's true. Yeah,
You
and
know?
I know in the episode for Scream 1, I talked about just the general cynicism, how like everybody was like so chill after like Casey's death. They were at school
Yeah.
like cracking jokes. And this one, like this movie takes place 2 years after the events of Scream, although the movie came out 1 year later. But like everybody's in their dress as Ghostface. They're like in a
Yeah.
theater in Woodsboro. They're like excited to see this movie. I'm like, man, that town would be traumatized if like 9, 10 people got killed in your small little town two
Oh,
years ago. You
totally.
would not be. But again, just an
Supporting the
interesting thing.
film.
I think. Yeah, I'm like, it's one thing that Gail wrote the book. I thought it's very interesting. But I'm like, man, it's just another interesting peek into just the cynicism of that late '90s, early 2000s
Yeah.
crowd. But I love this scene. I love seeing everybody running around with the ghost face mask. It's a huge departure from the opening of Scream 1, yet it still
Mhm.
manages to capture that tension because obviously at this point we know something's going to go wrong, but we don't know what exactly.
Yeah, and Maureen leaves the theater at a point to go get some popcorn, and she hears like the people behind her talking. She's like, "I don't want to go back in the theater." Like the girl behind her is like, "I don't want to go back in the theater." Like these people actually got killed, like straight up. So there is that very meta element of the diversion or the difference, I should say, in audience perception of what's happening and of these traumatic events and of violence. Yet they're still there, eager to watch it regardless, at least in excitement at some point. So it's very interesting. She's trying going back, and Phil jump scares her, probably the first like little scare of the movie. And sadly, he
Yeah.
meets his demise like immediately after, in a way that it's the first kill of the movie, and I like the kill. It is a little bit logistically odd how it all goes down,
Dude,
but
yeah.
you
It's
know,
weird.
I think this is the movie where we could talk about this maybe the most, with the teleportation powers, hidden element that Ghostface possesses in these films.
Yeah, it's one of those things where it's like when you try to get into the logistical details of it, some things
Mhm.
don't add up. But even for me, like he goes in the bathroom. There's like two people at the using the urinal, so he has to go into a stall. And while he's in the stall, he hears some like sounds from the stall next to it. And I guess growing up, I always assumed that he heard like people having sex or moaning, so he was trying to like be like
Okay, yeah,
a
good.
perv and
I like that you're
listen.
bringing this up because I had the subtitles on
But
today.
that's not it. It's somebody's
Yeah,
like whispering. They're like saying something about like mommy did it or
yeah.
mommy something. And it obviously is just some weird foreshadowing because the theme of motherhood comes back. But I'm like,
Hmm.
what did he think he was hearing that he pressed his ear against the
That he
stall?
wanted to know too. He was like, I gotta get in on this. Like,
Yeah,
no,
because I
Phil, don't do this, man.
yeah, I get it if he's being like a pervy dude, but I'm like, if you just hear somebody like creepily chattering to themselves, I'd be like, the
I
hell's
would
going on
try
in
and
that
get out of
stall?
there as fast as possible. Absolutely.
Yeah.
But homie
And
sticks his
then
ear on the wall, which is also pretty disgusting. This is a public
yeah,
restroom. Gets stabbed through it
100%.
and just starts spitting out blood. He falls down, and then all of a sudden, a figure with the ghost face mask reappears in the theater next to Maureen, wearing his jacket. And this is when you know it's over. Maureen is
Yeah.
probably done.
That's very unsettling, in like a
Yes.
very casual way when he sits down because obviously she's unmoved by it because she's like, oh, this guy still got the ghost face mask on. But we as the audience are already like, oh no, like where is this going from here? Because it's like we know that's the killer, but they're still in a crowded
Mhm.
theater. How does this all play out? And then I think yeah, the next like 2.5, 3 minutes is pretty bonkers.
Yeah. Maureen she's reaching, she's cuddling him because they're seeing Casey's recreation of Casey's death scene from the first. She's
Yeah,
getting spooked. And right when she grabs onto him, she's like, my hands are wet. What the hell's going on? She got blood all over him. Then Jada Pinkett lets out. I mean, props to her for this performance. Arguably like one of the best performances in her career, because she like fully sends the screams and sells the terror
mhm.
in this scene. She gets stabbed, and like you said earlier, she's trying to run up and down the aisle like, I'm getting stabbed, and everyone is just messing around with their little glow stick knives, except for one girl, and they keep showing her throughout the scene, who gets like a little bit of blood on her, and she's like, what's going on, what's going on?
Mhm.
Eventually leads to Maureen getting up on the theater stage, collapsing in front of everybody as they all slowly realize what's going on. I love how the scene just ends in silence.
Yeah.
complete
I
silence
was
right when she hits the ground.
I was gonna say great like acting from all the extras because yeah, once she like
Oh,
hits the
totally.
ground and
Yeah.
they show the cast, you can slowly see like one by one everybody like there's people taking their masks off, people like slowly like there's you can feel the tension in that room. Everybody's like, wait, is this real? Like you
This
can
isn't
feel that
part
oh
of the
shit
show.
moment. Yeah,
Yeah.
from everybody. And I just wanted to call out when we're watching Stab, and I love that they go full screen and just show us like 10 seconds of Stab here and there throughout the movie.
Mhm.
Um, Man, somebody really gave Gail the nitty-gritty details in that book because she has like every movement of
For real.
Casey Becker, like even down to like jumping out the window and getting chased. I'm like, that investigation was like rock solid
Yeah,
because they
there's a
found out
scene later
everything
on
that
that made me
happened.
think about that too, when they're showing like Tori Spelling and Luke Wilson's recreation
Yeah,
of a scene like in the high school. I was like, how did Gail know about this? But hey, it's a
yeah.
movie. I get it.
I'm,
There's gonna be some
I'm like,
funny, funky stuff in there, but
she has done her research, but I maintain and I'll make my case again that Gail's an amazing investigative journalist. So I'll give her the
I believe
benefit
it.
of the doubt on that. Yeah,
Yeah, I
and
believe it, dude. Gail's the best.
Yeah, but I mean, crazy intro. It manages to pack the same emotional weight, I think, as the Casey Becker
Mm.
death in the original. It's very tragic how Maureen dies, um, and then yeah, that kind of sends us off. It's cool.
Yeah, it's funny because in these first two, especially, it's a very sobering intro because you're, going in to watch a fun little horror slasher, and it's like, no, this is like disturbed and messed up. And then how Wes and Kevin kind of take the humor from that point on in every movie is very interesting because it still works and it still ends up being a very funny movie. And I think this one, I might think maybe not a better film than the original, but I think I do find it slightly funnier, maybe unintentionally so at times, but I do have a really good time laughing along with this one.
Yeah, I definitely laughed more watching Scream too. I'll say that for sure. But I also agree with that, where some of it's intentional and some of it isn't. But yeah, it is a
Yeah,
very
I
funny
can't wait
movie.
to get there's some scenes in the middle of this movie that are so funny. I can't wait to get to, but without further ado, next comes the intro of Final Girl, Sidney Prescott, back at it again.
Yep.
And this is something I want to say with all due respect to every single member of this cast. Okay. This is arguably like male and female, like the finest cast
I knew it
of the
was coming.
90s.
I knew it was coming. I was watching this movie and
Oh,
we get to like
man.
Windsor College and we just go in. It's like Nev Campbell. I'm like, damn. And then we just
Yeah.
meet everybody in this cast. I'm just like, damn. Then we
Yeah,
meet like
dude.
Gail Weathers. I'm like, damn. This is a very
Everybody
good
had a little
looking
bit of a
movie.
glow up. They're all back and ready to go. Like our characters that survived, at least being Gail, Dewey, Randy, and Sydney. They're all back,
Yeah.
which is very
Even
nice. I feel like that's not something we get too often, which is good.
yeah, I mean, even Randy's got like the nice like beard now. It's kind of
Randy
growing
looks
in
good,
more. Like,
dude.
yeah, everybody's kind of glowed up a little bit in this
Yeah,
movie, which
Randy
is cool
looks
to see.
good. Everyone's slaying it, and this is also kind of tying into the appearances as well, and how they are so stunning in this movie. What is also stunning, and what I love about this movie is that for a large portion of it, Sydney is like far smarter and experienced, and it shows in her
Yes.
actions within the film for the most part. I'm starting with
Hmm.
this scene where she full on is just like, this is a prank call. I got your caller ID right here, buddy. You're caught up. And it's like, man, it's so satisfying. And it's always good to start a movie like that and then kind of knock that main character's confidence down a little bit. And they have to work towards finishing the job or escaping or whatever it may be. So I love where Sydney starts in this movie.
It's a great way of writing character growth, man. It's why Sydney Prescott's my favorite final girl. It's why she is for a lot of
Mhm.
people because that character is just so well written. She could have easily just been back to square one, like running and screaming, and the movie probably would have been fine. But yeah, the movie
Mhm.
opens up and it's like, no, this is not like senior in high school Sydney from the last movie. She is smarter. She's a bit more hardened now, and they continue that development throughout the series.
Yes.
But yeah, I love that where yeah, she's got the caller ID. I also like how that's kind of the movie even in Scream 2 1997 slowly starting to grow up with technology because obviously we got caller ID here. Then the
It's
tech
true.
only gets crazier in future Scream installments.
Yes.
Um, yeah, I think this is a perfect introduction to college Sidney Prescott.
Yep. College Sydney Prescott. And the change of environment's great too. I want to say that first and foremost. Like I love Windsor College. I think it was a very good change of pace from Woodsboro because of the unfamiliarity of it as well. And also the broadening of victims, which sounds horrifying to say, but the amount of carnage and different targets that you may not be expecting because it's in a different setting allows for some fun set pieces as well. So yeah, love the college setting, love introduction to College City and her roommates, the faded
Yeah.
Hallie, who is a character that I feel like I kind of want to talk about it before we get too deep in the weeds here about her original role, because in this movie, I would say she's probably the most underdeveloped supporting character in the film. She is literally just Sid's nice best friend, who I enjoy the performance of, but very bare bones in terms of development.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, I like Hallie a lot. I have a note here that I'm pretty sure she has like a Freddy Krueger sweater in her closet when
Oh
she
no
opens
way!
it
I
up.
haven't noticed that.
It's like red and like a very dark blue stripe, and I'm like, it
Okay,
doesn't
I
look
like that.
exactly like it, but it's also too similar to be a coincidence.
Yeah, for
Um,
sure.
I noticed that, but yeah, this is like one of several like deep behind the scenes like production theories about Scream 2, original ideas for this movie, and Hallie's role in it may or may not
Mhm.
have been bigger originally.
Yeah, which is fascinating because even in watching behind the scenes, I saw a clip of Jerry O'Connell, who plays Derek in this movie, talking about how the script was like kind of constantly changing when they were making this movie, and that none of the cast really knew who the killer was on any given day until they were wrapping this movie. How true
Yeah.
that is, or maybe that was just his perception of the set, I'm not sure. But to me, I feel like they've kept that energy through Scream, because we've heard stories, the filming of Scream 5, that was very similar. They had fake scripts, tricks were played to divert your attention away from who the killer was. And it's interesting to know that her role was far more significant and how it ended up coming out in the final cut of the film. There's a lot of characters like that in this one too, which is interesting.
Yeah, this is one of those things where it's like there's parts of the backstory here that are still kind of unresolved or unconfirmed. In 2017, celebrating the 20th anniversary of this movie, Kevin Williamson did a couple of interviews, and he
Mm,
talked about like the original ending and leaks and stuff. And he talked about how there was an ending where you would have gotten Derek and Hallie, who's Derek and Cindy's boyfriend, Hallie's a roommate, as ghost faces, but they also would have been in cahoots with Debbie Salt. Cotton would have been in on it. It would have been like a bunch of people conspiring to
wow.
kill Sydney. There were like leaks, and then that kind of got pulled back. And then he said from there he wrote like dummy drafts so that if there
Mm,
was another leak, like a bad one might go out. So there was a dummy draft that was just Derek and Hallie. There was a dummy draft that he wrote that was like Dewey was the killer, like a bunch to throw people off from the original ending, which is just crazy that that had to happen. And again,
yeah.
you're right. It stayed through the entire franchise. It became a thing hiding that mystery.
Yeah, and I think with this movie too, it's so fun because the who done it element in this movie and the red herring element in this movie, I feel like is played expertly well, especially by the end or when on a rewatch when you're realizing the games that one of the killers is playing the entire movie and kind of pushing forward the trope, so to speak. And in talking about tropes, obviously we got to get to this film class scene. Let's
So
talk
good.
about sequels. And this is Randy's introduction. Sydney sees on the news, oh my goodness, there's a murder. Are we connected? What do we do? And she goes, first thing I do is find Randy. He's sitting in
Yeah.
film class, and we get the introductions of Cece, played by Sarah Michelle Gellar, and Mickey, played by Timothy Oliphant, who are both great in this movie as well. And it just spirals into this debate about sequels. Are they derivative? Are they better? And Joshua Jackson, who is also in this scene as like a little cameo, like spewing off Terminator and Alien stuff. I like this scene. I
Yeah.
know some people complain a little bit about the cheesiness of it and how on the nose it is, but sets up the tone so well for the upcoming events. And without it, CC would probably not even like have a role in this movie.
Yeah.
So I'm glad that they kept this scene in.
Yeah, you probably don't even call Sarah Michelle Gellar a supporting character if the scene doesn't exist. But I love
Yes.
I love the scene. I love her like sticking up, being like, no. I think it's so interesting that she's kind of defending the point of violence in media, creating
Yeah.
violence in real life. She's like, we can't blame our actions on our entertainment. And I'm like, damn, this is so poignant in 2022. And you got to think like 1997. This is like pre-Columbine. This is pre like a lot of the stuff of the
For
modern
sure.
era that people point to when they're like, oh, violence in video games, movies. So I'm like, really like again, the Scream franchise is always like just a handful of years ahead of its time with its commentary, not just on movies but also society, because that
Yeah.
kind of expands outside of that. And then another note I had from the scene, something that I can't take credit for. I believe I saw this in a video a few years back, but
Mm.
when Randy is correcting the one student on the line from Aliens, because the guy says, "Get away from her, you bitch," and then
Yes.
Randy's like, "Oh, the line's actually stay away from her, you bitch." Randy's wrong. It is
Yeah,
get away from
yeah.
her, you bitch. Yeah, that he gets that wrong. I thought that was an interesting. I don't know if that was intentional to
I
show that like
wonder
Randy's not
about
as
that
smart as he thinks he
too.
is,
Yeah.
or what.
Which would be a nice touch, considering his fate later on in this film. That would be a nice touch that he was a little bit overzealous and overconfident in his
Yeah.
film knowledge or acumen of this thing. But yeah, great discussion that leads to Randy kind of popping up at the end and saying, if I had to change anything about this, I would let the geek get the girl, meets up with Sydney. This is where we kind of get the brunt of every other introduction. Dewey, Gail, as well as the sorority sisters, played by Rebecca Gayheart, who I called Marisha in the first episode for some reason. I don't
Oh,
even know
did you?
why, when referencing urban legend. Rebecca Gayheart, we know you, we respect you. And Portia LaRossi, great supporting characters who are just so funny throughout this. I wonder how large their original roles were within this film. Because in my readings, and this is going back to touching upon Sarah Michelle Gellar's tiny role in this movie, how minuscule it was. This is something that we've talked about off air many times, and I think many Scream fans have debated about this for years. And today, as I was trying to find behind the scenes for Scream 2, I stumbled upon a YouTube comment from L. Lambert, who I believe, or I it seems to be the origin of this Wes Craven Sarah Michelle Gellar issue on the set of Scream 2, and why she's not in the movie that much, and also why Jenny McCarthy's character in Scream 3 is kind of a spoof of Sarah Michelle Gellar in this film. Apparently, this commenter's mother worked on the wardrobe for Scream 2 and 3. Sarah Michelle Gellar obviously was very busy at this time. She was filming Buffy, I Know What You Did Last Summer. I believe the sequel was like immediately after this as well. So she was packed, young 20-something, and she was just frustrated. And as was Wes Craven, I guess that there was a production holdup due to her role in the film being more significant originally, and it just had to shift. And I'm going to put the photos up right now. We've seen these of these really they have to be during like this brief beginning like 20 minutes where she's talking with the sorority girls, and I guess the there was just a change in script during the leak. She was dating Jerry O'Connell at the time, which apparently Wes Craven did not have, like he had a problem with that as well. And it's a lot of conjecture and a lot of weird things involved with it, but it is noticeably odd how little she is in the movie. And there has to be some merit to these rumors, at least in my opinion, because it's just so strange. Her role is very, very strange.
Yeah, I think the point about her being in the background, oddly in some shots, is really interesting because in the
Yeah.
Scream 2 commentary track, it's Wes Craven and a couple producers. Well, Kevin Williamson's not in on this one. He specifically calls out how important like wide frame is for horror movies because it allows better
Mm.
depth. He says you can see people up close to the lens in the foreground as well as in the background. He straight up says that on the commentary track. So I wonder if that was like a very deliberate thing that this character would repeatedly appear
Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
background there.
It's very weird because this whole sorority storyline kind of sets up like the first couple big like action or horror set pieces in this movie too, where the two sorority sisters approach the group and they're like, "Are you coming to our event tonight or whatever?" And you could kind of just see like Sarah Michelle Gellar like wandering around in the background like aimlessly, and it's just like, what is going on? Like, what's happening? But yeah, I don't know how you feel about this new group of characters, but to me, they also hold up well against the original. I like all of them a lot. Even before the killer reveals, I enjoyed all of them a lot.
Yeah, I like them a lot too. I think they all feel like real people,
Mm,
just as much as the original gang does from the first movie. I love Derek's intro where it's Sydney and Randy are walking towards the camera down the
yes.
like the walkway, and he just like hops over like the fence and runs up to them. And then when he starts talking to them, his introduction, he like kisses Sydney and they start talking. Randy is so visibly like annoyed that this dude is here.
Yes, of course.
And I'm thinking back to that line in the movie store from the first one where he's like, "Oh, do you think like I have a chance with Sid or whatever?" I'm like,
Mm.
Randy probably still has a thing with Sydney, and he probably thought that when Billy died that he was like,
Oh,
this
this
was
was
his
his
time to
moment, dude.
shine.
Yeah,
Yes,
absolutely.
and like he's definitely got some like deep seated like hatred for Derek Loki.
Yeah, man. Can't beat Jerry O'Connell though. Sadly, he's a stud in this one. It's
Uh,
it's a tough sell, dude. Don't blame Sid at all. You know, Randy's a nice guy, but okay.
Yeah, I mean,
Derek,
I
as
like
sus
Derek.
as he may be, is a nice guy as well.
I like him a lot, and I think he deserved better. Derek is a really
Dude,
cool
Derek,
character.
there's a lot of characters in this movie that just deserve better, dude. Like Derek, obviously being one of them, and we're about to come up on Cece's death immediately after her introduction, like within 10 minutes. But right before
Yeah.
that, the return of Gale and the return of Dewey, which is so nice. And this is where we first get Dewey's theme, which is so
Yes.
perfect. The best
Hearing it
theme
just
ever.
like set off like an alarm in my brain, and I actually found out something brand new about this theme.
Oh, please share.
Again from commentary. So Scream 2 was scored by Marco Beltrami, who did a lot of the Scream movies, but Dewey's theme was actually from the John Travolta film Broken Arrow, and it was scored by Hans Zimmer. It was used as a
Whoa.
temp track.
Oh my
It was
goodness.
original, yeah, 1996 Broken Arrow. So like a year before this, they used it as a
Yeah.
temp track, and then they loved it so much that they just licensed it, and it became
That is
Dewey's theme.
insane.
Yeah, so that is a Hans Zimmer score. Whenever you hear Dewey's
Straight out of
theme,
John Woo's Broken Arrow. Wow, that's crazy.
yeah,
I did
right,
not know that. I can't even imagine
yeah,
that song in that movie in any context as
yeah.
well, which is
My
also very interesting.
that was my first. I was like, I need to like watch Broken Arrow now and see where this song comes up in the
Yeah.
movie because I can't imagine hearing it anywhere outside of Scream.
Yeah, man. This is
Uh,
just Dewey's theme, dude. It's always gonna be Dewey's
yeah,
theme, and it's just it just fits like the plucky, optimistic nature of his character so well. It's
mhm,
just a pleasant song, and he gets to meet with Sid. They catch up. Very nice scene. I love their dynamic. He kind of takes her as his little sister since rest in peace Tatum from the first film.
yeah,
So she's like she says it to Randy later on. She's like my surrogate big brother. Great scene. Yeah, I love David Arquette's performance in this. Like he is fully committing one to the limp, which looks very difficult and uncomfortable to do. And
yeah.
correct me if I'm wrong, it's not in Scream 3, right? Or it's very toned down if it is.
Yeah, I think he does tone it down. It's one of those things that people always make
Yeah.
fun of. Yeah, it's definitely not consistent though.
Yeah.
But
Dedication
he does
though.
it.
Respect it.
He does it hard in this scene, and we also meet maybe my favorite side
Oh,
character in this movie.
yes.
In this scene, Joel, the cameraman,
Oh man.
so good. Obviously, Gail's cameraman from the first film is dead. Got his throat slit. She's got a new one. Joel, who it's even funnier because he's a black dude, and obviously we've already gotten the commentary about black people in horror
Mm-hmm.
movies, and he's just like the smartest character in this movie because he shows up like here to do an interview like with Sydney. Sydney punches Gail again. We get a
Great.
repeat of that. There's a great exchange between Hallie
Did
and
you get that
Joey.
on film?
Yeah, it's like, did you get that on film? He's like, yeah, I got that on film.
Oh
And then
yes.
they just go off, and man, Joel's through line in this movie every time he shows up, it's hilarious.
Absolutely. I
Every
was
single
so
time.
hoping that Joel in some way would be a part of Scream 5. Like deep in the recesses of my mind, I was like, please bring back Joel because he's such a fun character. And I also love that his biggest experience or like moment of note in his career was shooting a bingo finals and almost winning an award for it. It's just like, dude, this guy's
Yeah.
great. He obviously, once he realizes like later on in the film the severity of the situation, he's like the smartest guy. He's like, I'm not going to deal with this at all.
Yeah.
And Joel, honestly, it was the best decision you could have made, buddy. I'm glad that you survived, even if you're not back in these Scream movies. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, love Joel, but I mean, it makes sense that he wouldn't come back because this guy wouldn't come anywhere near
Of
Woodsboro or
course.
anywhere
Yes.
that there's a ghost face sighting. He would not be anywhere near that place.
Yeah, and then very shortly after that, we get an excellent scene between Dewey and Gale, their reunion of sorts. And Dewey has a quote here that I'm not going to say because that's a mouthful, but I'm going to put the clip in. So funny.
Dewey, I never meant to imply.
How do you know that my dim-witted inexperience isn't merely a subtle form of manipulation used to lower people's expectations, thereby enhancing my ability to effectively maneuver within any given situation?
David Arquette just like commits so hard to being like this eccentric, like nice guy, very eccentric and weird though, and very awkward and very proud of himself. He wants to be Dwight now. He's like, don't call me Dewey. My name is
Yeah.
Dwight, and I'm a professional. I'm here to protect Sid. So don't get your cold-blooded little hands on me, Gale. You already hurt me once. Don't do it again. And yeah, their chemistry is great in this. Like, I think this is the year before they got actually married in real life. So I believe that they were together at this time, and it shows. Their chemistry has always been fantastic in these films.
It's very clear that they were like very much in love with each other in real life because they just pop on screen together. And can I say, like, I genuinely feel bad for Dewey in this scene because he
Mm,
truly seems hurt that like Gail kind of wrote him as
totally,
like
dude. Yeah,
this foolish like rookie cop in her book. Although he was like instrumental in helping to try to save the day. And I was like, you could tell like that really like hurt him. I was like, damn, Dewey, you didn't deserve that, dude.
for real.
I was like, I could see how that would really like kind of hurt a person. Again, just very deep, complex, emotional characters in this slasher film. I love it so much.
Yeah, I think what this film does really well, which you just mentioned, is it takes its time to really like build those character moments. There's a scene coming up later that we'll talk about in the theater, and I know a lot of people complain about that scene as well, but great, well-written scene. Like, it's totally unexpected and rare for a slasher to have scenes with that level of character development. Regardless if it takes away from the scares, I think it's great. I think it builds Sid up so much more and makes the ending of this movie so much more epic. And if they were to end it here, I don't know about you, but I feel like I would have been completely satisfied if the story wrapped up here with Sid too. Yeah,
Mhm.
I love everything about the character developments in this movie.
Yeah, you can say that honestly almost about any Scream film. That this is like a
True.
good ending to Sid's arc, which again is a testament to those movies being great open shut cases, usually not leaving any threads dangling. But I believe next we get Cece at the Delta Lambda Zeta
Yeah,
house.
Cece's death. Great performance from Sarah Michelle Gellar here, who is just supposed to be the sober sister. She's just supposed to be the DD and chill here, and her intent is to always pick up the phone because that's what she's supposed to do. Adds a whole level of terror because you already know what's gonna happen when Ghostface calls.
Yeah, she's watching Nosferatu on the TV, which I thought was funny. She's eating like popcorn, and then later in the scene we see a no eating in the living room sign when she's like running through the house, which I thought was also a funny touch. Not just great work from Sarah Michelle Gellar, great work from Roger L. Jackson, we get a hint of
Ooh.
him earlier on the prank call, but this is like our first full Ghostface, true authentic call to the movie, which I didn't even think of. We don't get in the opening theater scene, which I think was a kind of a
True.
ballsy move
True.
with
Yeah.
how iconic that became to not have a Ghostface call to open the movie. He's completely silent. But yeah, their back and forth was great. Ghostface is always sharp and clever.
Mhm.
I love the him kind of just toying with her. The scene where she like goes opens the door. One of the sisters comes in and they're talking. And again, to what Craven said about depth of field, where you see Ghostface like
Just
creep
run in
into
the
house
background. Yeah.
while Ghostface is talking on the phone. So is this like a 2-person job? Because he still like speaks like, is Cece there?
That's
As
what
he's
I was
like
assuming
walking.
as well. It had to have been.
Yeah, definitely a 2-person job. But I love stuff like that in horror movies. I'm a sucker for it whenever they throw something unfocused in the background, and we see him hide in that closet, and it's just like it's Chekhov's closet. Like you're just waiting for that door to burst open.
Absolutely.
Um,
And when it does, a great chase ensues. And I feel like this movie gets that element that I love about Scream right. The chases, Ghostface running
yes.
around, trying to stab. And she does a great job, dude. Cece literally like throws a bicycle from the second floor, like staircase down on him and stuff. Always wonder what it was doing there. We'll probably never know. But I mean,
Yeah,
it gave
but
her a couple more seconds of life. So we're thankful for the bicycle.
Yeah, why was the bicycle like the second floor?
Second
Yeah,
floor,
we're
like
creeping into
stuck
scary
in the
movie
corner
territory.
at the stairs too, not like in like a closet or something, like at the top of the stairs. But she tries her best to get away. She gets thrown through a window, stabbed twice. It's like a very like quick kill and just thrown off, and that's it. That's the end of Cece in this
Yeah.
movie. And
Brutal.
yeah, I also read in that little post that I was mentioning earlier that her original death scene was supposed to be more similar to Casey Becker, that she was almost supposed to make it to the party and just miss it and not. And I think that would have been very interesting too. But I think this is a good scene. It sucks that Sarah Michelle Gellar is not in this more, but we have another series that she's the star of the first film at least, and she's great there. So if you need more Sarah,
Yeah.
you know where to go.
Yeah, she's dead at 35 minutes in on the runtime, but it's all good, you know. Just having her in the movie at all, I thought was really, really cool.
Fun little touch for sure. Brings that Kevin Williamson world a little bit closer together too, which is fun. And then right after this is go for it, Donovan. Tell me.
I was gonna say also keeps my Scooby-Doo / Scream connections alive.
Very true. The
Matthew Lillard in
second
the first
Scream film with the Scooby-Doo star taking the helm. It's true, man. Matthew Lillard is actually in this movie, in the scene we're about to talk about too. He does a little cameo.
Oh, is
in the
he?
background of
I
the
didn't know
scene
this.
at the party. Yeah, I'll put the clip in right here, but he does a brief little cameo as a party goer. And this is the other sorority house with Rebecca Gayhart's character trying to get Hallie and Sid to be a part of it. Sid's not super with it, obviously. Mickey very clearly has a strong distaste for these sorority sisters. But they try to convince Sid because Derek's a part of their brother sorority. And the great line that comes from this is that they say, we like to keep it in the family. And it just, oh man, Sid's face right after that, great. And also Portia de la Rossi, her hi, no, I really mean that, hi, line delivery, amazing. Great supporting characters in the screen.
Yeah, I love this scene. When they get to the house party, I'm thinking in my head, I'm like, man, if I was Sidney Prescott, I would not go near any house party for like the rest of my life.
For real, yeah.
Especially after there's already been a murder. You know that it might have been started up again. But it's great. I think not too long after this is when they figure out about Cece's death back at the
yes,
at
very
the other
quickly, like
house.
right after, yeah.
Yeah, and they go back over there. There's a great moment where we're in the I think we're outside the house, and again, all the news is starting to get there. Gail shows up, and then that's when Joel's like, he says to her, he's like, I have to be honest with you. He's like, I'm not cut out for this. He's like, I came here to shoot an interview, like not be a part of a murder case or whatever. And I'm like, that's so true. Could you imagine if you showed up to a new job?
Oh, totally.
To like do it, and like within 8 hours, you're on the scene of a brutal murder.
You're covering like, 3 murders, dude. 3 murders within 8 hours. Absolutely not. I'm gone.
Yeah. He's just like, hell no. And then we also meet Debbie Salt here, right? Is this the first time we see
we might have met her a little bit earlier in the film, right where she came up on Gail and introduced herself, or this might be the point. I'm not sure, but this is for sure an encounter that they do have. And Debbie Salt, dude, Laurie Metcalf in this movie, she's given very interesting, fun performance because I'm not super familiar with Roseanne. I am aware that it is a famous sitcom and that she was a large part of it for its whole duration. So I can't imagine being an audience member in 97 watching this movie as a Roseanne fan and being like, what is this? What is going on? But she's great. I think the one complaint that I have about this movie that doesn't take away from my enjoyment of it very much, but it is a complaint I have, is how little the actual killers are in this movie. Is very odd. And obviously it has to do with the rewrites and whatnot too, I'm sure. But yeah, like the Debbie Salt scenes are just like kind of sprinkled throughout, and Mickey is like not in the second half of this movie until the end, which is also very odd. But hey, you know, we love what we get. Still so happy with this film, and it's still one of the better Scream films in my eyes, honestly, with that major flaw. And it's like we talked about in the first episode, the fact that this series exists at the quality level that it is at all due to all these issues behind the scenes is a miracle. So can't be mad at it, really.
Yeah. I believe Debbie still holds the record for the least amount of screen time for any ghost-faced killer in a Scream movie, which is interesting. But yeah, she's really only there whenever like Gail's there because she's always trying to like ride on her coattails. It's kind of her recurring thing until obviously her big moments and reveal at the end. But in the house, we also get a moment with Sydney and Derek where Derek's like outside, Sydney's inside, doors open.
Another great chase right here. Yep.
Yeah, and she gets the phone call, and Ghostface is obviously taunting her, and Sydney says something to the effect of like, whatever, like, come on, bring it on, whatever. And Ghostface is like, with pleasure, and jumps out at her, which is a great scare, which I totally forgot. That was a callback in Scream 5. We get a moment like that with Sam in the hospital. Where she's like, wow. She's like, if you want me, come and get me. And Ghostface is like, with pleasure. And he jumps into the
Didn't even make that connection. Room. Wow, that's great.
Me neither. Until I saw this and I was like, oh, wait, that was totally intentional. And then, yeah, great chase sequence. I love how we see Derek before the phone call, door closes, and then we don't see him. Like, they're very particular to not have him on screen as Ghostface is talking or chasing Sydney.
Yeah.
To keep that mystery up, constantly having you guessing about where folks are and who's doing what at this time. And then they play into that more when he gets into it with Ghostface, and then he just walks away with like a slash on his arm, which is super sus.
Yep. That's quickly followed up by hospital sequence where Mickey is like planting seeds. And this is what I was referring to earlier, where it's like, dude, Mickey's game in this movie is amazing. When you're rewatching it and you're just seeing him, it is funny that, you know, he ran back in there. That is weird. And Derek just does literally every single thing that you're not supposed to do.
Yeah.
boyfriend probably in this situation, and it just makes him look very, very suspicious. And it can't be helped. Like, dude, Derek, I'm sorry, you're a good guy, but dude, don't be so sus, man.
Looks so guilty in it. Yeah, in that hospital scene, almost to the point where it's like, oh, he can't be the guy because they're pointing the finger at him so hard. But that's also what they
Yeah,
did with Billy. So it's
exactly.
hard to really make that judgment. I also have to say, Timothy Oliphant, man, it's in this scene and all of them. He has
Man.
given crazy eyes throughout this movie.
Very much so.
He's like, and his eyes are like the size of moons. I'm like, this dude is like acting with the capital A right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought
There's
that
a
was pretty
scene we
funny.
didn't mention earlier with the introduction of Cotton Weary. When Gale
Yes.
gets punched. Cotton, who, if you've been watching these movies, you've been following, obviously is the man accused of Maureen Prescott's murder, incorrectly accused. He's free in this movie. Liev Schreiber's out of his little TV screen from the first film, and he's out about in the world. He thinks he has an interview planned with Sid. He does not, and that's kind of what leads Sid to get upset and punch Gale as well, being sprung up like this with Cotton. But during that scene, going back to Timothy Oliphant's eyes, when Cotton, I don't know if this was intentional or not, but when Cotton first appears, this dude lights up like a Christmas tree. And to me, like in my head canon, I'm just like, yo, he just found another victim or another person to frame that he didn't know was going to be involved with this at all. And I think that's a very interesting touch, even if it was unintentional. It just worked out beautifully then, I suppose.
Yeah, it's a cool moment where we get him in the flesh. And all this talk of Timothy Oliphant, I have to draw a sidebar here. If you'll indulge me for like 2 minutes.
Absolutely, my friend.
I mentioned this to you off air, but Timothy Oliphant, of course, was also in The Office for a short stint.
Yes.
Which that show makes a reference to Scream 2. I believe it is in, let me see, I wrote it down here, season 5, episode 9. Michael Scott, played by Steve Carell. It's episode Frame Toby, and he's talking about HR coming back. He hates this character. And in his interview, he says, he's like, I feel like Nev Campbell in Scream 2. He's like,
off to college with her friends, and she thinks she's free, but she's not.
Nope, the killer's back, and he's killing all her friends. And the scene goes on for like 45 seconds, and he's like, I learned a lot of lessons from that movie. This is just one of them. I'm like, what other lessons?
Makes you wonder.
Yeah, and it's one of those lines where I hear it in that show, and I'm like, what? Who in that writer's room like had this affinity for Scream 2?
Big Scream 2 fan. Man, this movie's good. I can't blame him, dude. I feel like this was just such like, it's like I mentioned in our original episode too. I feel like this movie stands so well on its own. Like, obviously, it's better if you've seen the first, and it does rely on knowledge of the first with its ending. For the majority of the time, though, works so well just as a horror standalone film. And I think it's a credit to Kevin Williamson for making that happen. But yeah, back to that hospital scene. Mickey's planting the seeds, and Derek, because he's pre-med, right? I think he's trying to become a doctor. Also more suspicious that he misses every major artery or blood vessel, and this dude just has like this super superficial cut that looks real gnarly but isn't. And Dewey is getting super sussed out by him, which is great.
Yeah, they do a good job at just churning that mystery. You really don't know who to look at for this. It's great. Love the hospital scene, and it leads into one of the more infamous scenes of the entire movie, I'd say. I believe the cafeteria is up next.
Oh, actually, I think right before that, do we have the copycat theory? Or is that after? I could be wrong.
With where we find out about the names.
The names, yeah.
That is a good question. I'm not sure. It might be. We can treat it as it is. But yeah,
okay, let's do it.
Like
Gale, Dewey, and I think it's just Gale and Dewey, huh? And Randy, maybe.
Yeah, and also I believe Chief Lewis is there as well, who played by Louis Arquette, father of Dave Arquette, which I didn't know till the credits rolled.
Yeah, very fun. Adds to that role dynamic for sure.
Trying to figure out what's going on with the killings. That's when they make the connection about the names. We had Maureen, that's the name of Sydney's mother. Phil Stevens, I believe Steven was the name of
Stephen Orth.
Casey's.
Yeah,
Stephen Orth. Yeah, that was Casey's boyfriend's name. So we're going in the order of people dying, and then we find out that Cece, her real name is Casey. So that is our order here. So it's the theory is a copycat killer. You know,
I do have something to bring up about this scene though, because I understand what they're saying in this scene. I get it, totally get it. But does this theory actually prevail by the end? Because I mean, the other names, I mean, but it does not, right? Correct? I mean, there's no
No, I don't.
correlation like Pixel Hembry and like whoever's next to die. You know what I mean?
No, I don't believe so. Yeah, so I don't know if Ghostface planned on like just dropping that halfway through. He's like, I'll wait for him to figure it out, and then I'll just like do my own thing.
He just couldn't find anyone with the
Or
same name as the principal, dude. He just didn't know what to do.
maybe it's the craziest coincidence of all time, and they were not onto anything at all. They just happened to stumble. It's like when you do the
True,
wrong
yeah.
math and get the right answer.
Yeah.
That's either one or the other. But no, that's a good point because it definitely does not continue throughout the entire movie.
No. But now
and
this is the infamous cafeteria scene. So let's talk about how we feel about this scene first. How do you feel about this as a Scream fan?
You know, it wasn't honestly until like a year or two ago that I even knew that this was like a divisive or polarizing thing. I didn't know that people like hated the scene. Which to fill folks in, yeah, it's where Derek gets on the table and sings a very extensive musical number about his love for Sydney. It's very theater kid, very like 90s teen movie. It's kind of out of place, but honestly, I mean, was it silly watching it? Yes. But I didn't hate it. I think I was like, if anything, it just kind of establishes that Derek is a goofball. It differentiates him from Billy, Sydney's past boyfriend. Because they do make some comparisons where they, kind of point to him as the killer. I'm like, Billy would have never did that shit. But it also, in a weird way, kind of endears you to him. Because after that, he's done with that. I'm like, this guy can't be the killer. And I was like, he's in love with
nice
Sydney.
guy.
Yeah. I'm like, if he is the killer, that is the most intense commitment I've ever seen. Because I mean, he obviously loves Sydney a good deal. To get up and I'm not gonna say embarrass himself, but
yeah,
I mean, he gets a standing ovation, and I'm like, you would
They're
not.
with you. People were putting money in his pants too. It was no joke.
Yeah.
He was getting high.
I was like, boy, what college was this? Because if I had done that in my university, man, I would have been like on everybody's
social pariah, dude. Like, who are you guys standing on the tables and singing to your girlfriend? Yeah, this scene is fun. Like, it's never bothered me. Honestly, I've always kind of liked it. Like, I've always thought that one of the fun things about this movie is that the tone in the middle of it is just back and forth between the comedy and the horror and the 90s cheese. Really, like the 90s cheese in this movie compared to the first one even is dialed up to 11 with the music choices. Even in this scene, there is like a song on the score that sounds very similar to like Bittersweet Symphony for some reason. Like if we played them side by side, which I'm gonna do just for this, it sounds so similar. It's so odd and such a staple of that time.
Don't worry, Sid. I know things are a little crazy.
And this is where we also get the introduction of the two detectives like protecting Sydney, whose names slip by my mind, but they're nice little characters for their brief amount of screen time as well. They suck at being cops, but they are very charming and nice and endearing.
Yeah, they're just hanging around. And right before we leave the cafeteria, I also want to say I love the look on Mickey's face throughout all of this. He's just so entertained by this. You could tell in his mind, he's like, look at this big, dumb, stupid idiot. Like he's just knowing like all the like
together
games.
Perfectly.
Yeah, he's like this fucking guy. It's great. But yeah, I love the guards following them just like in the courtyard slowly behind. And then Sydney even being kind of sus. So she's like, oh, it's probably better for if you do stay away from me. Just good little moments there between our characters, doing a lot of character building.
Yeah, at the end of the scene, he gives her his letters because he's part of a fraternity. So this becomes, I guess, the catalyst for what happens later on in this movie. Easy way of doing it. One that I don't mind either. There is like a giant weird convenience that happens involving that final scene that we'll get to. But yeah, easy setup. Like it. And this is like the last we also see of Mickey until the finale, I believe. If I'm not
we might get brief glimpses, but this is the last like meaningful moment I'm pretty sure he gets until then. I will say I believe so. Yeah, Derek gives her Sydney the letters here. I'm pretty sure I'll have to correct myself next episode if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure she's wearing them in Scream 3. She keeps them.
Oh wow, really?
Yeah.
Nice touch. I didn't know that.
Yeah. Amazing character touch. That she would have brought that with her. Very moving.
Nice. Man, poor Derek, dude.
Yeah.
So bad.
Deserved better. I think we get more stab around here as well. We get to see
This
a
is the
little bit
Baskin
more.
Robbins sequel rules explanation. We do get more stab, that Luke Wilson
Yeah.
scene we mentioned earlier. This is a perfect showcase of David Arquette being a very unique actor, perfect for this role. As Randy is explaining to him the rules of the sequel, who it could be, and Dewey kind of points the finger at Randy, saying, "It could also be you, dude." And he's like, "If it's me, it could be you." And David Arquette's the look on his face as he's like processing like the gears in his mind, like, how does that work? And he goes, "Okay, let's move on." Perfect.
Both of them are so good because, again, of course, it's a sequel. We had to get another Randy laying down the rules.
Definitely.
And he's like, body count is always bigger, more elaborate death scenes, which I don't know if the death scenes have really been more elaborate up to this point, but still an interesting note. And then he goes and it's like, if you want your sequel to become a franchise, and that's when Dewey cuts him off. And he never finishes that point. I'm like, what? It's like, what's that last rule? If you want your sequel to become a franchise, considering that we go on for 3 more, soon to be 4 more movies after this.
So true.
But I love that Randy points the finger at Mickey first, where he's like, dude's like a super horror movie freak. He's
Tarantino
like,
film nerd. It's like, yeah,
Tarantino film nerd.
he is.
Then he's like, but if he's a suspect, I'm a suspect. So let's move on. And it's like, you're totally right, because you're the exact same person.
Yeah.
Just in a very different way. I also love that Tori Spelling does end up playing Sidney Prescott instead. After she says it in the first, he's like, they probably get Tori Spelling, and then it becomes a call forward because Tori Spelling is in Scary Movie, which is a parody of Scream.
Yes,
yeah.
I didn't even
she's
think of
not
that.
playing. Yeah, she's not playing the Sidney Prescott character in
No.
that, but still, it's a funny enough connection. It's like a 3-movie like arc between Scream, Scream 2, and Scary Movie.
She's killing it in the 90s, yo. She's out of the time of her life with this franchise, horror in general. And Luke Wilson, too, who's like very young and he plays Billy. It's just like so weird seeing him in this movie. It's so odd with his little emo haircut and everything. It's like, all right. And like we mentioned earlier, how does Gail know? She's a great reporter. That's how.
Yeah, she's an investigator. That's how she has every detail down to the blocking of where people were standing.
She even caught Billy going stupid as he was walking away, too.
Oh, yeah. That's so true. It's great. I believe we also get some more another Joel here, which is arguably my favorite Joel moment, where he's talking to Gale Weathers, and he's like, "Why would you want to be here when the killer strikes again?" And he's like, "I'm going to do whatever any sensible human would do and like get the fuck out." And then he says, maybe my favorite Joel line, because I'll say the line first and tell you why I love it. He's like, "I want to report the news, not be the news." And I don't know if it's coincidence, but I went to school for journalism. They tell you that. They teach you that in broadcast. They're like, your job is to report the story, never be the story. Obviously, it's a little different. They weren't telling us like, don't get killed,
don't die, Donovan.
But it was more so like, don't inject your own personality too much or whatnot into the news. Like, you never want to be the story. That's a saying in journalism. So when he said that, I was like, that's like real. He's putting like real education in there.
Yeah, man.
He's serious about his craft. I respect it.
Joel's in the know, and I love his little line in this scene too, where he's like, "I should have read the book before I start working here. Like, I understand, but I'm reading it now, and this is bad." Like, and Gale just kind of like shrugs. He wasn't gutted; his throat was slit. This is a great scene. I love their banter together. And this is like one of the last moments of like levity in this movie until it's over pretty much, because after this is just a plethora of sadness and death and Sid going through it, business as usual.
Yeah, we're getting into like the second half of the runtime here, which as we're teeing up for the third act, it definitely descends to a bit darker, which Scream usually does in one way or another. But we get to because Sydney, we haven't even mentioned like her wanting to be an actor. That's like her thing. That's where she's doing theater. I love that Sydney wants to be an actor. I think that's a cool just like character detail of her. And I also think, again, you can tell like that. Like Scream 1 was kind of made in the vacuum, but by Scream 2, I think they knew that this was going to be a series or at least a trilogy at max. I love that she wants to be an actor because it's kind of a through line to her going to Hollywood in the third movie.
True.
I mean,
very true.
Just as a character, obviously she's not going there to like audition, but it's just it's cool that the character wants to be an actor and she ends up in Hollywood. Sure. Yeah, it's a natural progression, I think. And I think that her stage acting is pretty good. I'm like, Sydney's really committed to this play.
Very much so.
She's doing.
Yeah. Cassandra, her role as Cassandra, very great scene. Like I said, she gets the scene with her teacher beforehand where he's like, "You're a fighter, and I want to believe it. Like when you say it, Great
Mhm.
performance from Nev Campbell here. Might be my favorite performance from her within the whole series. Really
Mhm.
great stuff. And like you said, her stage acting immediately after, so good. And I get that many people say that this is like a very slowing, like a very unnecessary scene, a slowing down point for this film, but gets a great little, not scare, but a fun little set piece with she's performing. All these dudes are wearing masks and whatnot. And at first you can't really see it clearly, but Ghostface is kind of lingering around, weaving in and out. And she just starts to freak
Yeah.
out and panic. And I think this is such a good scene because while you're watching it, obviously you see him kind of scurry off at the end. But while you're watching it, you're like, is she just like tripping or is this dude like
Yeah.
actually there? And it kind of adds to that level of her own paranoia as
Mhm.
well. And whether or not this is connected to her, how deep is this gonna get and how bad is it? And very quickly after, Derek shows up and is like, I switched with Mickey today to look
Yep.
after you. And she's immediately like, bro, you're being sus. And Mickey is stirring the pot yet again.
Yeah.
Seems totally innocuous, but he knows what he's doing by sending Derek there. It's very interesting.
Yeah, 100%. And I love that it isn't clear whether or not that was just Sydney PTSD hallucinating when she sees Ghostface or if he's really there. Because it's not unlike Ghostface to just show up in mask in
Yeah.
public like no one's gonna see him. Does it in the first movie where he's like at the grocery store following them around. So yeah, I do think it's pretty cool that we have that kind of unclear moment. And then once we get the scene from the stage, I believe we move back outside the campus. We've got like
Yeah.
we've got
Here we go.
Gail, a bunch of characters here. We talked about shots at celebrities. This scene has
Yes, this is a good one.
arguably the biggest one where Randy like makes a comment about like Gail's nudes leaking online, and then she says it was just my head. It was Jennifer Aniston's
Jennifer
body.
Aniston's
A shot
body.
at Jennifer Aniston. Obviously, there's another layer there because she was on Friends with Courtney Cox. I'm sure
Yeah.
they were very close. But I thought that was pretty funny.
Yeah,
and
and
then
there's
this
a little
leads
callback
into
to Friends as well, where back in the Baskin Robbins scene, Dewey or Randy says Dewey is played by David Schwimmer in Stab, which
yeah.
is also very funny.
Yeah, that is another tether to Friends. I didn't even think of that when I heard it. But I think this leads into probably one of my favorite, and I'd probably say one of the more memorable scenes from this movie. When Ghostface starts
Absolutely.
calling them in broad daylight. Man, something about horror in broad daylight and Scream in broad daylight. This franchise does it so well. I think a particular moment from 5, and I think of this where like
Yeah.
it's daytime, we're out in the open, there's people around. Everything you know about horror movies is telling you nothing bad's gonna happen right now. Ghostface is calling, and he sees them because he's telling them, he's like, "Oh, you guys look blah blah blah," and he's commenting on like their mannerisms. It's clear that Ghostface is actually watching them. So of course they all like break out. They're trying to find him. Randy's like walking into random people on the phone, like, "Hey, what are you doing?" Great framing, as we can even see some characters in the background, like on the phone, and as an audience member, you're like, "Oh, is that them?" Red herring. And it all culminates in quite a tragic moment.
Yeah, man.
our boy.
Randy's on the phone with Ghostface. And this is something I want to mention before we get into his demise is that once again, Scream evolving with the times. In the first film, Billy was a prime suspect on the mere basis alone that he had a cell phone. Yet in this movie, a few years later, everyone on this campus rocking around with cell phones and it's normal. So very funny how the times change quickly. And Randy sadly meets his demise via cell phone call. He's on the phone, still snooping around, trying to get up close to people. He gets up close to Joel's news van, and he starts talking shit about Billy and Stu, saying like Stu was just a pussy and Billy was just a mama's boy. And this immediately gets him yanked into this van. Really shocking on the first watch, of course. It's horrifying. Because you know he's not getting out of this. And my favorite thing, as I mentioned to you before, is the boombox people walking by, just dancing as Randy's being like
when they just come over like
window. Yep.
When they just come around spinning.
You see Randy going,
it's so good.
Getting shanked, dude.
Man.
And dude, we don't even see it. I think that's also what is.
That's why it's so scary.
Yeah, it's a critical, important character, one of the only remaining characters from that first movie, getting killed unceremoniously in a very unsatisfying way. And that's it. Randy's gone. Just like that. Gail, Joel, and Dewey get to the car. They open it. Randy's dead. Blood all over him.
And then the Ghostface mask just sitting in the car, like they just left it and got out and then walked away. It's so shocking, so unsettling. It scared the hell out of me the first time I saw it. Probably the scariest moment for me watching this as a kid when I was younger the first time, because there's no clue. They don't imply that Ghostface is in that van. You don't know it's
Not at
coming.
all.
It's a surprise to us as much as it is to Randy. And yeah, it's really bad. And then also when Joel comes back to the van and they tell him what happened, dude's holding a big ass Dunkin' Donuts
Dunkin'
box,
Donuts.
which continues. Dunkin' Donuts was also in Scream 1 at the police station. They had a bunch of
Oh,
Dunkin'
okay.
Donuts on the desk. I believe I mentioned it briefly in that episode because the logo's like the exact same. I'm like, look
Yeah.
at Dunkin' Donuts keeping its exact branding from the 90s
Gotta stay
to modern
repping.
day. Yeah, and he's got that Dunkin' Donuts box on him. So there you go. But R.I.P. Randy, man. Although it's
R.I.P.
not his final
Super fun.
appearance in Scream.
Oh man, I totally forgot about that.
Not the last we'll see or hear from him.
See, that's the funny thing about Scream 3 is that, they just didn't like how Scream 1 and 2 went, and they just had to switch it up a little bit, say, this actually happened, this happened.
What a fun episode that's going to be.
I can't wait, dude. I cannot wait. Sadly, that's the end of Randy for now, though, until we get to Scream 3. Thank you, Jamie Kennedy, for giving one of the most iconic performances in horror film history with these first two movies alone. And, if you love Scream 3, I'm sure you love seeing Randy in there, too, on his little VHS. So thanks, Jamie. We appreciate it, bud. Very quickly after that, the return of Cotton Weary. Sydney gets a message. She's in the library, and this is, I guess, like an IM chat that exists within like the library school network is what the guy next to her mentions. It's like, I'm gonna kill you. And of course she gets up and freaks out. The two detectives are like, okay, we'll find him. This is the beginning of bad detective choices from these two dudes. One literally walks her to like right next to the stairs, like a completely like easy exit for anyone to walk in and out of, and just goes, wait right here. We're gonna look at the computers right now. And just runs off. And immediately, within 5 seconds, Cotton Weary just shows up and grabs Sydney and is like, hey, what's up? And I mentioned in the previous episode that I really like Cotton, and I do. That does not change the fact that he is like very, very creepy and aggressive.
He gets super aggro in the scene.
Intense, dude. Like, and even if he wasn't a murderer, and obviously we know where his fate ends up in Scream 3, we know how he handles the situation in Scream 2. Dude, Cotton's done some shady shit in the past, for sure. For sure, dude. Cotton's got like a menace to him, and he's basically pressing Sid like, yo, you got to do this Diane Sawyer interview. I need my 10 minutes. You put me in jail. You got to help me out now, right? And he's guilt tripping her, bro. And she's like, I don't want to do this. And it's just getting very tense. Great acting from Liev Schreiber in this scene.
He's great. And it's as wrong as he is for like accosting Sydney in the staircase like that, you kind of understand where he's coming from, because this is
very true.
That, like, went to jail. Went to jail, spent like a year, 2 years, whatever, in jail for a crime he did not do. He was cleared of. And now he's just trying to like publicly clear the air. He wants Sydney to go on TV with him and be like, wasn't him. Everything's good. I apologize. This is all a misunderstanding. Because although he's been freed from prison, I'm sure his social image has still been completely destroyed. Probably has no friends.
He was saying it like he'll walk around him like he's a murderer still, even though he's been cleared of the crime. And it's like, man, I get it, dude. Cotton, bro, we get it. Just, coming off a little hot there.
His frustration's understood, and I have to mention in this scene, they give you a clear shot of it. Cotton is wearing black boots in the scene.
Yes.
They show it. We talked about it a lot last episode about how in Scream 1 they purposely put a lot of the male actors in black boots because that's what Ghostface wears. So you would try to draw that connection to different potential suspects. He's wearing them clear as day. I'm like, I know that's intentional. I see what you're doing, Wes Craven. And I love that because he's a suspect. He could very well be a killer here. Would definitely have motive. He's capable. He has means. So yeah, he's definitely in that mix. I love that little detail there.
Yeah, dude. Wes stays on with the details and with the continuity of shots. And after seeing a bunch of bad horror movies recently, it's very nice to see such care put into the details. And I'm very eager to see Scream 3 and see if Sid has that necklace, because that's an amazing touch I've never actually noticed. But yeah, the detectives grab Cotton real quick. He's like, I'm innocent. I never hurt anybody. He gets taken to the police station where Dewey, Holly, and Sid are, and Gail's outside with Joel. And I think this is kind of trying to be like, yo, I literally did not do anything. They have to let him go. So they do. And he still is so sly and still such a bastard that he gives Sydney his card still to call him after everything that just happened. Was like, hey, if you change your mind, call me. We'll do it. And Dewey quickly snatches up. It's like, let's get out of here. And they basically say that Sid is getting out of town with her roommate. They're going to go away. The two detectives are going to take them for the time being until things blow over. And Gale outside, Joel's done, dude. Joel does not want to be a part of this anymore. He's like, this is it. Like, I'm not dying for this. It's not worth it. This isn't my life. I'm not built for it. Goodbye. And they literally, as the scene of Dewey and Gale are talking outwards, you see Joel slowly walking away and getting into a taxi and closing the door and just driving off. It's perfect. Goodbye, Joel.
I
Thank
clapped.
You,
clapped in my living room watching. I'm like, get the hell out of there, dude. Smart man. Thank you.
Good guy, Joel. And this obviously more great chemistry between David Arquette. Actually, we get a little Debbie Salt moment right before Dewey and her start talking. Is she there? And Gale kind of freaks out on her, is like, I don't want to deal with any of your like copycat little like impersonation of me, and like you need to quit it now because it's getting for real. She just quickly
she puts her foot down.
Yep. And Debbie's like, you're right, sorry. And once again, this is one of the only problems they have. You did not know that Debbie Salt is involved in this in some way. I mean, she is like, has to be the most like bare bones written character. There would be no other function of her being in this movie if she were not one of the killers. I could not imagine that turnout ever happening. So very on the nose, but great performance from Laurie Metcalf. They're still holding that reveal in. And this is where Dewey and Gale decide to team up, use the footage that Joel left, and figure out where the killer is, because he's got to be somewhere in this footage because he's been watching this entire time. And man, this is the last bit of this film now. It's just nothing but great sequences back to back to back to back.
Yeah, this is kind of our jumping off point to the final arc. I love the great investigative instincts from Gale to be like, oh, we look at the footage. I believe they go back to the school to check it all out. We get them making out in the auditorium or whatever. Then of course they're interrupted because somebody is there. It's a ghost face and they're with them, which sets off another great chase scene with Ghostface chasing Gale. It's actually inspired by Mute Witness. Came out in 1995, a slasher where our character is mute and she's like stuck in a film studio and she's getting chased through. And it's very similar kind of set design, same kind of run where she's kind of like darting around like studio equipment, hiding behind booths and stuff. Gale does the same thing here. Great moment. Very intense chase scene. I love how Ghostface is framed in it.
Yes.
He's like a true predator. It almost reminds me of like Jurassic Park, where they're like hiding and you just see Ghostface in the back. He's like, you can see he's like so ready. He's like looking for. It's heart thumping, good stuff. Love a good chase scene.
Yeah, I think this at least at this moment in time, without revisiting all of them quite yet, this might be my favorite chase scene in all the Scream movies. Beginning to end, I think this is such a well laid out scene and building tension. I mean, from even when it starts, when you get them making out and suddenly a video pops on of Maureen at the movies, followed by Cece, followed by Randy, and you start to realize, okay, they're not just watching, they're documenting this and they want us to know that. And then suddenly the very like spine tingling switch of he's watching us now. You see them on the screen, flip around. That's when you get Ghostface. That's when the chase begins. And yeah, Gale like trying to like slither away quietly around corners and stuff. So good, man. And she ends up getting locked in that room. And this is where poor boy Dewey, man. Dewey has always got to get it in one way or another in these movies, sadly. And this is his moment. Then this is one of my probably maybe even my favorite scene in this movie, where the silence due to the glass protecting them from the sound.
Yeah, so the soundproof booth. Yeah,
Dewey like steps in like a hot dog or a pizza or something, and he's like knocking on the thing, like, Gale, come on, what's going on? And just gets stabbed in the back, pressed up against it, and Gale turns around to her horror, which is like, dude, the thought of you're hiding, you're probably wondering, where's my lover right now? I hope they're okay. And then suddenly turning around and seeing them just getting murdered. Horrifying.
It's rough, and it's the moment it has such a emotional payoff because obviously we get these great emotional moments with Gail and Dewey throughout
Mm,
the movie and their relationship. So yeah, you can like feel for Gail there in that moment where she's helpless to do anything because she can't
yeah.
just like burst in there. And again, I said in the first movie where I was like, man, Dewey looks really dead right there. In the second movie where he gets hit there, I'm like, man, it's really miraculous that he lives this. It becomes a meme, kind of a
Yeah.
recurring joke in the fan base that he survived like those first 4 movies
What did
despite
they say
getting
is the
like
reason in this one? It's like a plate in his back or something, or what are they like a nerve ending damage? Like what was it that protected him? They
oh
mention
man.
it in like a brief line when they're putting him in the ambulance at the end, but I'm not sure what they say. They
Yeah,
try and explain it though, at least a little bit.
I forget. All I know is Gail's like, "Oh my god, I can't believe you're alive," and he's got like one shoe on, one off, and he's like
He's like,
barely. He's like
yeah,
floating in and out of consciousness. He's like, "Oh god," it's like that's just the movie telling him like he lived, he'll be back again.
yeah.
Um, and they play that card with Dewey several times in the series, but
Mhm.
it doesn't take away from that moment. It's still very emotional.
Not at all.
Uh,
I like I said, like the pure horror on both of their faces when it's happening, and just the framing of it all with that window, the reflection of Ghostface as Dewey kind of slumps down over is just like, man, this is a great scene. And he can't get in. She throws like the little like shelving down so it blocks the door, and she's hiding away in there. Eventually, she gets out of the room though, bumps into Cotton Weir. He's got blood all over me. He's like, Dewey's down in there. What's going on? What's happening? And she's just like, "You're a murderer, bro." Which is my one, Gail. A little more reporting on this one. Just a little, You're quick to
yeah,
switch
I
up
mean,
on Cotton there, yo.
she catches the man with literal blood on his hands. I mean, that's
True.
pretty.
Pretty damning,
That's
I
pretty like on
suppose.
the nose there, yeah. And he's like, what? And he's like, I found Dewey, I promise. And then Gail's like, hell no.
Yeah.
And yeah, she goes and she gets on the phone and she's like, I've got your killer. It's blah blah blah. It's Cotton Weary,
Right
all
in
of
front of
that. Which
Debbie
of
Salt too.
course,
She uses Debbie Salt's phone, and
yeah,
that's the last we see of them for at least like 15 minutes, because then we get cut away to Sid, her departure. Derek says goodbye to her. He gets
yes,
snatched up by his frat bros and those 2 sorority girls because he gave her letters. And this is a
yeah.
great sequence here too that is full of weird little holes, but a fun, very tense sequence coming up with this car chase. If you want to take a hand at it.
Uh, I will hit the car chase. I also want to say with the Derek getting kidnapped by
Mm,
frat brothers, is also a good fake out scare where like when Sydney and Hallie leave and get in the car and it's just Derek standing there, you just see the one figure in the back in like a robe and you're like, oh, it's Ghostface. You think like this is his moment, and then of course like everybody else shows up, and I'm like, that's a
yeah.
good like little fake out scare because as the audience you're like, uh oh, here we go. But no, yeah, Sydney and Hallie in the back of the car with her security guards driving. You got to think you're in a moving vehicle, 2 security guards. Couldn't be safer. Could not be safer right now.
Yeah.
But of course, Ghostface must have just been posted on a street corner because when they
Yeah,
stop
this
at
is
like a light,
another weird teleportation geography thing where he just like suddenly appears out of thin air at a stop sign suddenly.
that that car is parked for at best 15 seconds. He
Yeah.
runs up, like crashes through the glass, stabs one guard. Ghostface goes full action like
Oh,
hero in the
Ghostface throws
scene.
like a full like spinning kick on the hood of the car at one
Yeah,
point
yeah,
to like knock
slides
down the
over,
other cop.
slides over the hood like Tom Cruise. I'm like, what the
Yeah.
hell is happening here? But needless to say, dispatches both of the 2 guards. Sydney and Hallie are both helpless. And then Ghostface takes the wheel, uh, starts driving, and I believe one of the guards is still in the street, gets hit, and he's like on the hood. He like
Yeah,
can't
he's like,
aim the gun
guys, move
straight.
in the back seat. I'm trying to shoot him still.
Yeah, he doesn't want to hit one of the girls. And then when that car crashes, this is
Oof.
probably the goriest like visual in Scream. I mean, there's a couple that
Yeah,
come really close, but that pole goes through his head, and you get
yeah.
like a full glory shot of it. I mean, he's like twitching still. I'm
Shaking.
like,
Yes.
yeah, I'm like, that is some like real deep like Evil Dead shit. Like that is not
Complete
in
and very
Scream
out of place
like
in this
that.
movie because this movie feels way toned down in terms of violence from the first one,
Yeah,
at least. And this all of a sudden
yeah,
is like far past the normal bounds of this series in general, as you said. And it is, yeah, one of the most memorable visuals from this movie as the pole through the car, through his face, and Hallie later say, "It's in his eye."
yeah. Yeah, in this scene, dude, you talk about like tension.
Mm,
It's so before like I kind of like reclaimed Scream and got back into it as like a teenager and a young adult now. Like as a kid, it was Randy getting snatched into the car and Sydney and Hallie being stuck in the back of this car were like burned into
for
my
sure.
brain. Like those two sequences, them stuck in the car, Ghostface seemingly unconscious in the front seat, and them having to like peel the partition barrier down to like crawl through over top of Ghostface to get out. It's like I don't know if I breathed watching that as a kid. And
Understandable.
again, good like fake out playing with audience expectations because you're 100% waiting for Ghostface to wake up right when Sydney's like climbing over his lap to like grab him.
Yeah.
I have to say, I hate to be the person like calling out why didn't this character do this, but I'm like, man, if I'm in that car, the second I pull that partition down, I'm ripping that mask off. So like as I'm yanking that mask. There's no hesitation. I'm not slow reaching.
Absolutely.
I'm like pulling his face off with the mask to see who's under that damn thing. Yeah,
I agree with
like,
you.
So much hesitation. I'm like, dude. I'm like, nah. I'm like, you totally should see who that is right there. But I get it. They have to save the reveal for the moment.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like I've seen some people online being like, she should have killed him right there. Listen, Sid is not like a stone cold like blooded killer. Like she's not trying to murder people, even if this dude is a murderer. Like I understand. That I don't expect, but the taking off the mask, come on, you gotta.
I'm like,
you gotta see
you
who
definitely.
it is.
I'm like, you snatched the mask there, but still, great moment, and you can even like hear Ghostface or the person beneath the mask, like kind of like snoring, like they're unconscious.
And you can actually, at the end of this scene, as Sid's running away, you can see through the eyes. There's a light shining through the eyes, and you can see a face through it. I'm not sure if it's actually Timothy Oliphant, but yeah.
Yeah, no, I assume it probably would have been like a stunt person. But yeah, one of those handful of moments we've talked about in the franchise where you can either see or hear the person behind the mask. Does not happen often, but it is very interesting when they do that because it's clearly very intentional because other times they hide it. But yeah, Sydney gets out the car, goes to let Hallie out, and then it's like, still doesn't work. You got to climb out too.
And this is where it really gets scary because then, you know, Sid's probably safe, but Hallie, dude, like this is where I would like first couple times watching it, it's like, dude, she's gonna die right here and get dragged back in the car and killed. She gets out.
Yeah,
Happy
exactly.
say, you know,
I did not expect Hallie to survive that first time watching this movie because obviously, like, main character might live, but Hallie's like, yeah, no, like she dies here, right? But again, it's a great fake out because she gets out and you're like, oh, look at that, we're good. They run down the street, and then that's when it hits Sydney. That's when it hits it's good old Sid, where she's like, I gotta know who it is. I want to go back. And I love that when she turns to go back, that shot, you can immediately see there's nobody in that car.
Yeah.
Like it's a few more moments until she realizes it, but we can already see the audience. There's nobody in that front seat anymore. Which I love those moments where things are kind of revealed to the audience just before the character finds out. Goes up, looks in the car, dude's gone. How did he get out and slam that door without anyone hearing? Ghostface, man, that's why.
Man, skilled teleporter.
And then we have our moment where Sydney yells back, he's like, he's not here. And then we cut to Hallie, and if there's ever been a shot that says I'm about to die, it is Hallie standing there. That huge wide shot, like, what do you mean? And then boom, Ghostface jumps from behind the roadside.
To think what could have been of that character, but she just meets her demise right here, just like that. Sid, you know, obviously freaks out, and she just starts booking it. She's like, well, it's over. Yeah. I'm gonna run back to school now.
Yeah, I mean, luckily it's a campus town, right? So everything's pretty close by. She can get back to school, but it's like, man, I'm like, there's so many things that could have been done for her to live that, but it's all right, you know. It's unfortunate. R.I.P. Hallie. She made it pretty far.
Let me ask you this: how come? Because we're about to get to the finale of this movie. How come Sid goes back to the theater? What is the reason that she is compelled to go? I know that she calls out like her teacher's name. She's like Gus or whatever, like when she rolls up in there. But what, when she's being chased, compels her to hide within the theater?
Yeah, that's a good point. I think maybe, like you said, maybe she knew that a trusted adult would be there.
Maybe, yeah.
I think maybe because really it's like, where else does she go? Because she could go back to her dorm, but for all she knows, that's like her dorm is empty. And if I'm the killer, that's the first place I go looking for her is her room. So maybe she was like, as far as getting to where other people are, specifically people I can trust, that's probably my best bet. But it just so happens that that's exactly where they wanted her to be.
It worked out beautifully for all parties involved. Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly. It really does come together magically. But yeah, this is our finale. This is our Stu's kitchen of of Scream 2.
Welcome to Stu's kitchen. Yeah, this is the ending, and I love how this scene is like presented and set up. Like you get the recording turning on of like the tape, like the audio mix of this play or whatever. You see the little hands moving, setting everything up. It's spinning. Great. And Derek is very quickly lowered from the rafters. Sid's like, we got to get you out of here. And she's untying him. And then this is the first of 2 Ghostface reveals. Ghostface climbs up on stage with the Roger L. Jackson voice. And then quickly switches to just simple Timothy Oliphant Mickey in all his glory. Rips that thing off. And this is where Mickey plays the game. Mickey plays the game, dude. And he gets Sid to get all switched up on herself.
Again,
this is madness.
Timothy Oliphant acting with a capital A. Acting with a capital A here. I love, first of all, that we get Mickey's voice, true voice, before the mask actually comes off. There's like that 1 second of recognition for the viewer and the characters in the movie. I love that when he takes it off, we get a surprise Sydney call back to the original Scream. Love that line. More cool audio mixing there as well. And then he's like, yeah, you know, me and Derek, he's like right partner. He wants Sydney to think that was his accomplice. She's immediately like, oh shit, like it's the boyfriend again. Mickey's playing into that. And he almost convinces her, it seems like.
Yeah, just about, pretty much.
Yeah, and then you know, then Derek gets shot mercilessly.
Derek, man.
It's just so sad, man. I mean, dude's like strung up like on a crucifix with no clothes on, gets shot in the chest because he was there. I mean, he had no reason to die. He just gets killed because you fell in love with the wrong girl, dude. And then to make matters worse, I completely forgot this. His last words.
His like, dying words. Yeah.
He's like, I would have never hurt you ever. And then that's it. And then he dies. I'm just like, God damn, that's so sad. I'm like, that is
Timothy Oliphant's little smile afterwards too, just so devious. He's like, I got you all.
Yeah. And then it's like we get into what I think is like the most fascinating part of this entire third act, is where Mickey like spills his whole motive. And of course, a big make or break for the Scream movies is like, what's the motive behind the killers? Because there's always a motive. He wants to get caught. And his whole thing is like the spectacle of it. He wants there to be like a huge court trial. He straight up calls out Cochran, referencing the OJ trial, which was huge in the 90s.
Yeah.
But that's like his whole thing. He wants like the clout. And again, I'm like, for a movie that came out in 97, dude, like so many of these themes just tie into like 2022 so well. More, I mean, obviously better than the filmmakers probably ever thought. But Scream is just such a prescient franchise time and time again. And I'll talk about that again with the sequels. But yeah, I was like, what a twisted fucking motive for this dude.
Yeah, it's one of those funny things where movies are ahead of their time without even knowing it. And when something becomes culturally aware or relevant, it's like you're watching something, you're like, man, did they actually know that this was going to be a thing? Or did they just get super lucky? I think about that with Avatar, dude. I just rewatched Avatar, and Jake Sully, the main character of that, is vlogging, like he's doing a diary log. And in the movie, they treat it like it's this like insane foreign thing. Like, why would I ever record myself on a computer? What are you talking about? Look at us now. Look at us now.
I mean, Kevin Williamson might be a time traveler, dude, because all the Scream movies he wrote. Man. I mean, I'll get to when we talk about 4, but even that movie, and it's like about influencers and stuff.
4
like,
especially is insane because there are things brought up in that movie that literally did not exist at that point.
Yeah,
you know, so it's nuts.
Yeah, it's insane. But I love this whole scene with him giving out his doing his monologue. I also love how like separated the first and second killer reveals are, because in Scream you get Billy and Stu like 45 seconds between each other. Like it's a quick 1-2 hit, and it's great because that's a surprise shock. But I think at this point the audience is expecting 2 killers, so the movie does a good job at drawing you along the thing, like, oh, maybe this dude's just like acting on his own. And then you hear like rumbling and stuff, and then Mickey's like, "Oh, what's that?" He's like, "Backstage, is that my
lifted up into the rafters?"
Dead body.
Oh man.
He's like, "Is that my partner?" And then I love the decision that like the door flings open, and you're like, "Who's gonna walk through?" And it's just Gail. And then he's like, "Gail?" And then there's that moment for the audience.
No, just wait a second.
Yes, it's like it's not me. And then you just Debbie Saw just comes through with the gun, like, crazy
Her
eyes in full
eyes too,
effect.
yeah, man. Oh, Laurie Metcalf in
Mm.
this scene, bro, when she is just going full on villain mode, man. Because then not Billy, Mickey does my favorite quote, Billy's mother, of course. He screams at the top of his lungs.
Billy's mother. Nice twist, huh? Didn't see it coming, did you?
And this is where they reference, how could they not recognize Mrs. Loomis? And she's like, oh, I lost 70 pounds, got some plastic surgery, and here I am.
They don't, but I love that Sydney does. The
Yes.
second she walks through, Sydney's like, Mrs. Loomis. And it's in that moment I realize Sydney has not seen this woman the entire movie. If one single time Sydney had been in any of those like areas and saw Debbie Saw, she would have been like Mrs. Loomis, and the movie would have ended. Or I guess she would have like just jumped on her and tried to kill her.
Which is so
there.
interesting because she gets closer a couple times. Like in that first scene where Sid punches Gail, Debbie's there and she's very close. But I think what adds to that element is that she did change her appearance a little bit, enough to not catch at a glance. But if she's staring at her, you'll obviously be able to recognize someone you've known or seen your entire life. So very great reveal. And she's like, I'm gonna be Mickey's mom. Like she's like totally playing into like Mickey's like deluded scheme. And then very quickly just shoots him. She says, we met on a psycho board. He's an up-and-coming serial killer, and he's gonna be the perfect guy to frame. And she just freaking blasts him up. He does a little fall down barrel roll type deal. And I love the shot of Mickey's eyes after he's been shot. And he's like looking around like, did that just happen to me? And just slides slowly down. So good.
It's that realization setting in because she says he's like, there's not going to be any trial, and shoots him. Then shoots Gail. Gail just catches a hot one.
Dude, Mickey just lets that thing sing off to the side and catches her. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's all intense from here, and we get our classic Scream finale showdown, Sydney
Final
versus the
Girl
killers.
Yep.
I think the stage is such a good like set piece for this finale.
Yeah, I've never really taken into account how different and unique it is for a horror movie ending, the way the set piece is all laid out, because very like halfway through the movie they show like these little things backstage are like, I don't know why, but they're like sparking up. Like, I don't know if you recall that, but when the dude is like turning it on, when they're like rehearsing, this thing, like this little breaker is like exploding already. So all this stuff is very clearly like very fragile. Sid just gets an axe and starts. I love the little like shining nod. Debbie Salt looks through the little hole, and you think Sid's gonna do the classic, Jack Nicholson, Jack Torrance shining moment. And she just starts going to town on like the back like set of this stage, and she just starts tearing down all the equipment. Lights are falling on Debbie, and her like demise is ultimately due to getting like little plastic rocks that fall on her. Like it's great, dude. I love how cheesy and fun this scene is.
It's a great set piece. One that you wouldn't think of writing a movie. But even before Sydney gets the upper hand on Debbie, I love the line from Mrs. Loomis, where after she shoots Mickey, she's like, my motive isn't as 90s as Mickey's is. Just good old. It's just like, I'm old school, just good old fashioned revenge.
That's all it is,
I'm like,
dude.
damn, it's so cold, and it's also it's that classic like trope of like mothers in horror. I think like Friday the 13th with Pamela Voorhees. It's just good old fashioned revenge, nothing more. It's great. And Sydney's also she throws more shit on Billy, which of course like gets Mrs. Loomis fired up even more. Just a great back and forth between them in this finale.
And I also love like Mrs. Loomis is like doubling down of like killing Randy spontaneously, where she's like, look what happened to the last guy that talked about my son that way. Like, I just put him in the van and killed him just like that. So don't do that with me. It's like, man, she is wicked, because you have to assume that Mickey probably did the majority of these things. When Mrs. Loomis is going to town, like, she is not shy about it. She's brutal. She's a murderer, straight up.
Yeah, it's one of the handful of times in the Scream franchise that one of the killers admits to a specific kill. It only happens a couple times, but this is one of them, which is always interesting for the folks that like to go back and map things out. But yeah, and she's got her own plan where it's gonna look like she's gonna get herself out of there. Going to make it look like this was Sydney's thing, or no, that Mickey was the killer, and that he got like one shot off on Sydney before he died.
Like a movie. And, yeah, literally.
Yeah, exactly. And then it's not long until Hero of the Day shows up.
Golden Boy himself, Cotton Weary. Back at it again. Love this dude, man. Yeah, Debbie's got Sid like held up hostage style. And Khan's just like, what's going on? I just got a gun and I'm here. And he's like looking at Mickey like, who's this guy? Sid's like, that's one of the killers. This is the other one. So help me. And Debbie's trying to talk Khan into it. She's like, bro, listen, this ain't gotta be a problem. Like, you could walk out of here, be a hero.
Yeah.
No one will be none the wiser. And no one will stop you from telling your story the way you want to tell it. And Cotton, I mean, like he has a moment of like maybe consideration, maybe he's acting, maybe he's considering, but he's playing into it to whatever degree is real. He's playing into it, and it's like, okay, Sid, what about that Diet Sawyer now?
Yeah, he's like, it'd be something real good right about now, huh? But it's like, as a viewer, you believe that in that moment he could like turn on Sydney because with how aggressive he's been towards her, she's been cold to him. He could just be like, yeah, die, like F off, whatever. But yeah, Sydney says like, she's like, you got it, when he asks about the interview, and then as soon as she says you got it, he shoots.
No hesitation.
Yeah, that's all he's waiting for.
Yep. Oh man, I think she's honestly already dead at this point. They double tap her later on, but he like shoots her like right through the throat. She does like a whole like roll over. She's down, eyes wide open, looking to the sky. And this is where Sid's like, "Hey, give me the gun, bro. Like, I don't trust you to be waving that thing around anymore. Now that I'm free, like, you gotta give it to me." And Gail with a great jump scare, one that actually got me on this watch. I totally forgot about that.
Oh yeah,
she just sticks her arm up, and they're like, "Whoa, what's going on?" She's like, "I've just been down here and hurt since I got shot."
Her reaching through the fog again. It's why like this final set piece is so great of it being on a stage and them having these different like instruments and stuff at play here. Yeah, her hand like sticks through the fog, and you completely forget that Gail was like sitting under there, like bleeding out from a gunshot wound. And then, of course, Scream tradition, we get Mickey jumps back up to life, and then Gail and Sydney just unload on that. I mean, he gets like
a John Woo broken arrow scene, bro. They go to town on this man. Dual wheel, and they go to town on this guy. And Mickey, I mean, obviously, like you've been saying, Timothy Olyphant is just giving like an insane performance. He like does like a whole like monster scream when like he gets up to, and just like freaks out. And that's when he does his crazy flip, falls over. He's done. Story's over. Sid double taps, and Cotton also makes like an offhanded remark about Gail being like, "I thought you wanted to be in the trenches." Which is also so funny. And she's like, "Shut up, Cotton, no more." And you know what's funny is that I honestly wish we got more of Gail and Cotton, dude. Now that Cotton was actually a part of these movies, it would have been nice to see a little bit more of their relationship, why she felt so compelled to clear his name other than the story. Is there more? Maybe not, but it would have been nice.
Yeah, they have an interesting dynamic. Who knows? Maybe they'll explore it in Scream 3. But yeah, it's great. I love Sydney's line after she double taps Mrs. Loomis. She's like, "Just in case." Then obviously in the first movie, she says, "Not in my movie." Always great one-liners from Sidney Prescott. Always one step ahead. Legendary. I have it in my notes. GOAT, final girl. Always will be. And this is kind of our resolution. We go outside. We see Joel's back. He came back after.
Joel came back to finish the job. Yeah.
He came back. He's like checking on Gail, see if he's all right. Like the dude did care a little bit deep down.
Yeah, I love what he says too. Like right when he hands her the mic, he goes, "You're Gail Weathers. Now go. Like you got this." You know, it's like, man, Joel's the homie for real.
Again, such a great like cameraman, off-screen producer things, right? Like again, speaking from a journalism angle, like you're always trying to like make the person on camera look as good as possible, giving them tips like that. Again, that's such a like cameraman thing to do. Like, yep, you're Gail Weathers, let's do this. Shooting it, and then I love that Gail again could repeat the end of the first movie, but she like sends it. She's like, "That's the hero over there, Cotton Weary," and of course this dude like. Happy, this is all he's wanted. All he's wanted, man, is his like respect and adoration.
15 minutes, dude. That's all he wanted was his 15 minutes.
Yeah, and Joel and everybody else runs over to him, and he's like, "I'd love to talk," but he's like, "That's gonna cost you. Here's my card, my number, and whatnot." And I'm like, "Dude, you wasted no time. Monetize that fame," which is light spoiler for Scream 3. It's gonna pay off for him.
Yeah, respect. He obviously had a good life. For the next few years, at least, once he cleared his name. But then we get Dewey. He's alive and he's getting wheeled in. And also an inverse of that first movie where Gail is like, "Nope, I'm going with you. I'm going in the van with you. We're going to the hospital." I love that, man. Love that. And like I said, like if the Scream movies wrapped up right here, be great. Joel's got the camera. He walks up to Sid And yeah, that's pretty much it. Sid walks into the sunset immediately after, and yeah, here we are.
We get Sydney kind of just aimlessly walks out into the courtyard, probably thinking like, God, my life is so like effed up beyond like
Yeah, she don't want to talk to
comprehension.
cops or nothing. She's just like, I'm not doing this.
We're just doing a slow zoom out, and this is when we see like one of the main school buildings, and there's a bell tower on top of it. You see like the bell tower, and this is where an old Scream conspiracy comes in. Apparently, there was originally plans for here that there would be a cliffhanger. So as the camera pans out, Sydney's like a little ant in the distance. You would see a ghost face standing on top of the bell tower, just looking down at the courtyard at Sydney and all the survivors and the reporters and stuff. And that would be your setup to lead into Scream 3, there being another killer out there. Which, if you know that movie's reveal, it kind of ties into the co-conspirator subplot that didn't really exist but does, whatever.
Yeah.
And I just think that's so interesting that was an idea.
Yeah.
That was conceived.
Yeah.
But didn't come to fruition. I don't know. I mean, Scream never does cliffhangers, but that would have been bizarre. I'm curious, what do you think though about that? If they
yeah, that's the thing is that, like you said, Scream they've never done it. Literally, not even once, not even a little bit. They've pretty much always closed, and it could end right there. But I think it would have been very interesting to see a ghost face there at the end. We're not gonna say who the killer is this episode for that movie, but I think it would add a lot to that character. One. And two, I think it could do a negative and a positive to that character. Because one, now you have expectations for who this character is going to be, because they're obviously very clearly good at their job. They're plotting and they're hiding in wait for Sydney to slip up. But at the same time, once you find out who that character is, it's like, this was the person that did all this? Like, really? So it's a double-edged sword. I think overall, though, I am glad they kept it out of the movie. Yeah, there's just so many other ways to work around that weird retcon thing that they do in Scream 3. That would have been one of them, maybe. But it would have been great if, imagine in Scream 3, they put in that scene. Like, it zooms out just a little bit wider, and Ghostface is like,
like
on the top of the tower, like looking.
That's like your opening.
Yeah.
It would have been certainly been interesting. I'm sure we're gonna talk all about like just the inner workings of that plot line and everything in Scream 3. But no, I think it's also best that they kept it out of Scream 2, because again, it's good to have that resolution, right? To have like Sydney walking out into the open. I know this movie came out a year after the first one. This is 1997, but Scream 3 doesn't come out until 2000. So if that had been a cliffhanger, they kind of would have left you hanging for a few years there until they resolved that.
Yeah, which
I don't know if it really would have been worth it. Yeah, it certainly would have been a choice. But I don't think they lose anything by not having that in there. And then we're off. We get more 90s credits, that Scream font, classic video of the characters imposed. Yeah, picture credits. Great with all the new cast members. 2 hours long. It is the longest Scream movie. It's exactly 2 hours on the dot. No Scream film is longer than it so far. I guess we'll see how long Scream 6 is. But I thought that was interesting. It's the longest Scream movie by runtime.
Yeah.
Still, it's a Wes Craven movie, so it flies. Well paced. Again, excellent movie. And for a long time, I would say that I think it was the consensus among horror fans in general that Scream 2 was like the definitive best Scream sequel. You'll always have your outliers, but I think like even in 2011 when 4 came out, I think it was still like understood like 2 was like the best sequel and the rest were just okay. It wasn't until like I feel like 2018, 19, like a few years before we got 5 that people came around on 4, and you started to get people that would be like, oh, actually 4 is the best sequel. But 2 is for a long time held that crown, and now of course it's fighting with 4 and 5, and who knows what 6 will have in store. But yeah, 2 was like the OG like slasher follow-up that kind of defied the trend of bad sequels to horror movies.
Totally.
Got to give it its respect.
Yeah, man, this movie deserves all the love. This was my first Scream, and it always will have that special place in my heart because of that. Shout out to Mickey, man. King Mickey. Crazy dude.
Would you
go for it?
I have a couple questions for you. So would you say that Mickey is your favorite Ghostface in the series? Or
oh man.
Well, I'll say outside of the original, notwithstanding.
Then probably, yeah. Outside of the original, maybe Mickey is my favorite, just because of how crazy Timothy Olyphant gets by the end of this. He is just like some of the most memorable sequences in Scream as a series are because of him. So, and honestly, Debbie Salt's up there too. I'd say Scream 4 has one of my other faves, but yeah, I would say that Mickey is probably, yeah. And like I was telling you before we aired too, like I think my ranking changed where this is like firmly, at least at this moment of recording this episode on September 27, 2022, this is my favorite Scream sequel, my favorite Scream movie after the original. I love this thing. I love this thing.
Totally valid. It is an amazing, amazing movie. It's getting its 25th anniversary celebration this year.
Yes.
Back in theaters for a special event, getting a 4K UHD release. So this is kind of the year Scream 2. And also, Scream 2, I mean, this is kind of speculation, but if trends continue, you would assume that Scream 2 will have the strongest parallels to 6. I mean, we already know that 6 is probably going to have like the college New York setting.
Yeah, which makes me so happy. This is awesome already.
Yeah, the stage is set, no pun intended, for Scream 6 to follow in the shoes of Scream 2 in a lot of ways. So I think it'll be interesting to see if there are any references to Scream 2, Windsor College, and the people of that film. But that'll remain to be seen.
Yeah, I hope that in that movie we get them watching Stab 2. I would love to see who they pick to play Mickey in that movie's universe.
Oh, yeah, it'd be good.
Can you imagine? That'd be so funny. And just screaming Billy's mother with a completely different actor.
I was literally gonna say, I just want Mindy to like turn the TV on, and all you hear is Billy's mother, and it's like just like some random actor. It's like Timothy Chalamet. we went two different directions.
Oh man, put Mark Ruffalo as Debbie Salt and Timothy Chalamet as Mickey. That'd be good.
Yeah, that would be amazing. I would love that.
Oh man, and that's a wrap on Scream 2, buddy. That was a good one. Thank you so much for joining me again, my friend. Anything you want to plug before we get off the line here?
No, just keep sticking with us. It's been fun to shoot so far. It's only going to get more exciting as we go on. I know 3 is the most disliked movie in the series. Might be the most fun episode of this show.
I think so.
And then of course 4, 5, and Sunday 6 will all be fun to talk about. So thanks for sticking with us.
Yeah, we appreciate y'all. And the first couple episodes have been an absolute blast. I hope that you have been watching the Scream movies along with us. If you have not, go check them out. And if you are just watching and you haven't seen them in a long time, still go check them out because they hold up and they're great. We'll be back for Scream 3 very soon. We'll see you guys on the next one. Peace.